Zara Holloway stared at the computer screen, her heart pounding in her chest. The results of her DNA test glowed back at her, a digital testament to a truth she'd never imagined. She blinked hard, hoping the information would somehow change, but the words remained stubbornly in place. Paternal match, Thaddeus Blackwood. Thaddeus Blackwood. The name echoed in her mind, a distant bell ringing with familiarity. She'd seen it in newspapers, heard it on TV. The CEO of Blackwood Industries, one of the largest tech companies in the world. But how could this be possible? Zara's fingers trembled as she reached for her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found her mother's number. Lydia Holloway had raised Zara alone, working multiple jobs to make ends meet in their small apartment. The story of Zara's father had always been vague, a brief relationship that ended before Lydia knew she was pregnant, a man who'd moved away without leaving any contact information. "Mom?" Zara's voice cracked as Lydia answered. "I think we need to talk." An hour later, Zara sat across from her mother at their worn kitchen table, the silence between them thick with unspoken questions. Lydia's face was pale, her hands clasped tightly around a mug of cooling tea. "I never thought," Lydia began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Zara, you have to understand. It was just one night, a chance encounter at a charity event where I was working as a server. He was charming, attentive. I felt special for the first time in years. But when morning came, he was gone. I didn't even know his full name." Zara struggled to reconcile this image with the powerful, almost mythical figure of Thaddeus Blackwood. "But Mom, didn't you see him in the news? His picture is everywhere." Lydia shook her head, a rueful smile on her lips. "Honey, 25 years ago, Thaddeus Blackwood wasn't the man he is today. He was just starting out, barely known outside of certain business circles. By the time he became a public figure, you were already a toddler. I never made the connection." As the reality of the situation sank in, Zara felt a maelstrom of emotions swirling within her. Anger at the years of struggle they'd endured while her biological father lived in luxury. Curiosity about the man who'd unknowingly shaped half of her genetic makeup, and beneath it all, a gnawing uncertainty about what this revelation meant for her future. "What do we do now?" Zara asked, her voice small in the cramped kitchen. Lydia reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand. "That's up to you, sweetheart. If you want to reach out to him, I'll support you. But remember, biology doesn't make a family. We've always had each other, and that won't change." Zara nodded, squeezing her mother's hand. But as she lay in bed that night, sleep eluding her, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had irrevocably changed. The face of Thaddeus Blackwood, stern and imposing, haunted her dreams. Over the next few days, Zara threw herself into research, scouring the internet for every scrap of information she could find about her newfound father. Thaddeus Blackwood's rise to power was well documented, from his humble beginnings as a software developer to his current status as a tech mogul worth billions. His personal life, however, remained shrouded in mystery. There were mentions of a wife, Cordelia, who'd passed away a decade ago, but no record of any children. Zara wondered if she had half-siblings somewhere, unknown to the world. The thought both excited and terrified her. As she delved deeper into Thaddeus's life, Zara found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. Had her passion for technology, her knack for problem-solving, come from him? Was her stubborn determination a trait inherited from this man she'd never met? Finally, after a week of internal debate, Zara made her decision. She would contact Thaddeus Blackwood. But how does one approach a billionaire CEO to say, "Hey, I think I'm your long-lost daughter"? In the end, she settled on a carefully worded email to Blackwood Industries' public relations department. She kept the details vague, mentioning only that she had information of a personal nature that Mr. Blackwood might find interesting. It was a long shot, she knew, but it was all she could think to do. Days passed with no response, and Zara tried to push the whole situation to the back of her mind. she threw herself into her work at the small tech startup where she'd been employed for the past 2 years, determined not to let her newfound knowledge affect her daily life. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, as Zara was elbow-deep in code, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Her heart leapt into her throat as she answered. "Ms. Holloway," a crisp, professional voice inquired. "This is Evelyn Sharp, Mr. Blackwood's personal assistant. He's received your message and would like to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Can you make yourself available?" Zara's mind reeled. Tomorrow? So soon? Yes, she stammered. "I'll be there." As she hung up, reality crashed over her like a wave. She was going to meet Thaddeus Blackwood, her father, in less than 24 hours. What would she say? How would he react? The possibilities were overwhelming. That night, Zara tossed and turned, her dreams filled with faceless men in expensive suits, all turning their backs on her. When morning came, she stood before her closet, realizing with a sinking feeling that nothing she owned seemed appropriate for meeting a billionaire CEO. In the end, she settled on a simple black dress and blazer, her one concession to professionalism. As she made her way to the towering Blackwood Industries headquarters, Zara felt like an imposter in her own skin. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and steel, making Zara feel small and insignificant. At the reception desk, she gave her name with a shaky voice, half expecting to be turned away. Instead, she was ushered into a private elevator that whisked her to the top floor. Evelyn Sharp, a tall woman with sharp features and even sharper eyes, met her as the elevator doors opened. "Ms. Holloway," she said, her tone clipped. "Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. This way, please." As they walked down a long hallway lined with abstract art, Zara's nerves threatened to overwhelm her. She'd rehearsed what she would say 100 times. But now, faced with the imminent reality of the meeting, all her carefully prepared words deserted her. Evelyn paused before an imposing oak door, her hand on the handle. "Ms. Holloway," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Whatever happens in there, remember, you have every right to be here." Before Zara could respond, Evelyn opened the door and ushered her inside. The office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. And there, silhouetted against the skyline, stood Thaddeus Blackwood. He turned as Zara entered, his piercing blue eyes, so like her own, studying her intently. "Ms. Holloway," he said, his deep voice filling the room. "I understand you have something important to discuss with me." Zara took a deep breath, steeling herself. This was it. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "My name is Zara Holloway. I recently took a DNA test, and the results showed that you're my biological father." The silence that followed was deafening. Thaddeus's face remained impassive, but Zara saw a flicker of something, surprise, recognition, in his eyes. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "I see," he said, his tone measured. "And you're certain about this?" Zara nodded, pulling out a folder with printouts of her test results. As Thaddeus looked them over, she launched into the story of her mother, the charity event, the brief encounter that had led to her existence. When she finished, Thaddeus set the papers down on his desk, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Holloway, Zara," he said, "I hope you understand that this is unexpected. I'll need time to process this information and verify it independently." Zara felt her heart sink. She'd hoped for... what? A tearful reunion? A warm embrace? She realized now how naive that had been. "Of course," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I understand." Thaddeus nodded, his posture relaxing slightly. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll have Evelyn contact you once I've had a chance to look into this further. In the meantime, I trust you'll keep this matter confidential." Zara nodded mutely, feeling dismissed. As she turned to leave, Thaddeus spoke again. "Zara," he said, his voice softer than before. "For what it's worth, you have your mother's eyes." The words followed Zara out of the office, down the elevator, and into the bustling street below. She'd done it. She'd met her father. But instead of answers, she felt more confused than ever. Over the next few weeks, Zara's life took on a surreal quality. On the surface, everything was normal. She went to work, spent time with friends, called her mother regularly. But beneath it all was a constant undercurrent of anticipation, wondering when she'd hear from Thaddeus again. When the call finally came, it was Evelyn Sharp's crisp voice on the other end of the line. "Ms. Holloway, Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you again. Are you available this evening?" This time, the meeting took place not in Thaddeus's office, but in a private dining room at an exclusive restaurant. As Zara was led to the table, she saw that Thaddeus was not alone. Beside him sat a young man, perhaps a few years older than Zara, with the same sharp features and penetrating gaze. "Zara," Thaddeus said, standing as she approached. "Thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet someone. This is my son, Xavier." Zara felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. A son? She had a brother? Xavier stood, offering his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Zara," he said smoothly. "Dad's told me all about our unique situation." As they sat down to dinner, Zara's mind whirled. She'd prepared herself for many possibilities, but somehow, the existence of a sibling had never crossed her mind. She studied Xavier surreptitiously, noting the designer suit, the confident posture, the way he seemed completely at ease in this world of wealth and privilege. Thaddeus cleared his throat, drawing Zara's attention. "I've verified the DNA results," he said, his tone businesslike. "There's no doubt that you are indeed my daughter. I've consulted with my lawyers, and we're prepared to offer you a settlement in exchange for your discretion in this matter." Zara blinked, taken aback. "A settlement?" she repeated, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. "Mr. Blackwood, father? I didn't come to you for money. I just wanted to know where I came from, to understand a part of myself I never knew existed." Xavier chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Come now, Zara," he said, swirling his wine glass. "Surely you can understand our position. The media would have a field day with this story. It could damage the company, tarnish our family's reputation." "Our family," Zara repeated softly. The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. She looked at Thaddeus, searching his face for any sign of warmth or connection. But his expression remained impassive, his eyes calculating. In that moment, Zara realized that she'd been chasing a fantasy. The father she'd imagined, loving, regretful, eager to make up for lost time, didn't exist. In his place was this man, cold and distant, more concerned with his company's image than with the daughter he'd never known. "I don't want your money," Zara said, her voice gaining strength. "And I have no intention of going to the media. I came here hoping to find family, but I see now that was a mistake. Thank you for your time, Mr. Blackwood, Xavier. I won't bother you again." As she stood to leave, Thaddeus's voice stopped her. "Zara, wait. Please." There was a note in his tone she hadn't heard before. Uncertainty, perhaps even a hint of regret. I'm not good at this. Emotions, family, they've never been my strong suit. But I'd like to try. To get to know you, if you're willing." Zara hesitated, torn between hope and caution. She looked at Xavier, whose expression had softened slightly. "It might be nice," he said quietly, "to have a sister." In the end, Zara sat back down. The conversation that followed was awkward, stilted but tinged with possibility. Thaddeus asked about her life, her work, her dreams. Zara, in turn, learned about the pressures of running a global corporation, the weight of expectations that had shaped both Thaddeus and Xavier. As the evening wore on, Zara began to see glimmers of herself in these strangers who shared her blood. Thaddeus's intense focus when discussing technology mirrored her own passion for coding. Xavier's dry wit reminded her of the sarcastic humor she'd inherited from her mother. When they finally parted ways, nothing had been resolved. There were no tearful embraces or promises of a happy family future. But there was a tentative agreement to meet again, to try and bridge the vast gulf between them. Over the following months, Zara's life took on a new rhythm. Her meetings with Thaddeus and Xavier became regular occurrences, sometimes formal dinners, other times more casual outings. Slowly, painfully, they began to build a relationship. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, misunderstandings, moments when the cultural and economic divide between them seemed insurmountable. Zara struggled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering if she could ever truly fit into this world of privilege and power. Thaddeus grappled with his own shortcomings as a father, trying to connect with a daughter he'd never known he had. Xavier, perhaps surprisingly, became Zara's strongest ally. He took it upon himself to help her navigate the complexities of their father's world, offering advice and support when the pressure became too much. "It's not easy being Thaddeus Blackwood's child," he told her one evening as they shared a drink after a particularly tense family dinner. "Trust me, I know. But you have something I never did, the chance to define your own relationship with him on your own terms." As the months turned into a year, Zara found herself straddling two worlds. She maintained her job at the startup, refusing Thaddeus's offers of a position at Blackwood Industries. Her relationship with her mother remained as strong as ever, though Lydia struggled at times with the idea of sharing her daughter with the man who'd unknowingly changed both their lives so many years ago. But Zara also began to carve out a place for herself in the Blackwood family. She attended charity galas on Thaddeus's arm, her presence sparking curiosity and gossip in equal measure. She spent weekends with Xavier, learning to sail on his yacht and teaching him the joys of binge-watching trashy reality TV. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Thaddeus began to change. The stern businessman facade cracked, revealing glimpses of the man beneath. A man capable of warmth, of humor, of genuine affection. He would never be the doting father of Zara's childhood fantasies, but he was trying, in his own way, to make up for lost time. It was at a family dinner, nearly 18 months after that first fateful meeting, that everything came to a head. Thaddeus had just finished telling a story about his early days in the tech industry, his eyes alight with the passion that had driven him to success. "You know," he said, looking at Zara with a mix of pride and wonder, "I see so much of myself in you. Your drive, your intellect. It's remarkable. I can't help but think of all the years we lost, all the potential that went untapped." Zara felt a familiar pang of resentment. "We may share DNA," she said carefully, "but my drive, my intellect, those came from the way I was raised, from the example my mother set, working herself to the bone to give me every opportunity she could." Thaddeus had the grace to look abashed. "Of course," he said quickly. "Lydia did an admirable job. I just meant—" "I know what you meant," Zara interrupted, years of pent-up emotions finally bubbling to the surface. "You meant that if you'd known about me, if I'd grown up as a Blackwood, I might have accomplished so much more. That I might be running my own tech empire by now, instead of working for a small startup." The table fell silent, the tension palpable. Xavier looked between his father and newfound sister, his expression a mix of concern and understanding. Thaddeus set down his fork, his brow furrowed. "Zara, that's not what I—" "Isn't it?" Zara pressed on, unable to stop now that the floodgates had opened. "Since the day we met, there's been this undercurrent of regret, like you're trying to make up for lost time by molding me into the daughter you think I should have been. But you don't get to do that. You don't get to waltz into my life after 25 years and decide who I should be." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I'm proud of who I am, of what I've accomplished. And yes, maybe I could have done more with the Blackwood name and resources behind me. But I wouldn't trade the life I've had, the values my mother instilled in me, for all the wealth and privilege in the world. With that, Zara turned and strode out of the dining room, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. She made it as far as the foyer before she heard footsteps behind her. "Zara, wait." It was Xavier, his face etched with concern. "Don't go." "Not like this." She turned to face him, suddenly exhausted. "I'm sorry, Xavier. I shouldn't have exploded like that. It's all been too much, you know? Trying to fit into this world, to be the daughter Thaddeus wants, while not losing sight of who I really am." Xavier nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know. Believe me, I know. Growing up as Thaddeus Blackwood's son, it's not easy living up to those expectations. But Zara, you have to understand, Dad, he's trying. In his own, admittedly clumsy way, he's trying to connect with you." Before Zara could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "He's right." Thaddeus stood in the doorway, his usual commanding presence diminished by the regret evident in his posture. "Zara, I owe you an apology. Several, in fact." He stepped closer, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets, a gesture so at odds with his usual poise that it caught Zara off guard. "You're right. I have been trying to make up for lost time, to give you the opportunities I think you deserve. But in doing so, I've failed to see and appreciate the remarkable woman you already are." Zara felt her anger begin to ebb, replaced by a cautious hope. "I don't need you to give me opportunities, Thad. Dad," she said softly, testing out the word. "I just need you to see me for who I am, not who you think I should be." Thaddeus nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I'm beginning to see that. And who you are, Zara, is extraordinary. Not because of your connection to me or the Blackwood name, but because of the strength and resilience that brought you here, that allowed you to open your heart to a family you never knew existed." He hesitated for a moment, then continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I missed out on so much of your life. Your first steps, your first words, your graduations. I can never get those moments back. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your future. Not as Thaddeus Blackwood, CEO, but as your father, flaws, mistakes, and all." Zara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, not by a long shot. There were still hurts to heal, bridges to build. But for the first time since discovering her true parentage, she felt a genuine connection to this man who had unknowingly shaped half of her genetic makeup. "I'd like that," she said softly. "But you have to understand, my mom, my life before all this, that's still a huge part of who I am. I won't give that up." Thaddeus nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Your mother raised an incredible daughter. I'd like to thank her someday if she'd be willing to meet with me." Xavier, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of relief and amusement, chimed in. "Well, now that we've had our obligatory family drama for the evening, what do you say we salvage the rest of this dinner? I, for one, am starving." The tension broken, Zara found herself laughing. "You Blackwoods and your appetites. Fine, let's eat. But I'm warning you both. The next time someone makes a comment about untapped potential, I'm throwing my drink in their face." As they made their way back to the dining room, Zara felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Balancing her two worlds, navigating the complexities of her newfound family while staying true to herself, but for the first time, she felt equipped to handle it. Over the next few years, Zara's relationship with the Blackwoods continued to evolve. There were still moments of tension, misunderstandings, and cultural clashes, but there were also moments of genuine connection, shared laughter, and growing understanding. Thaddeus, true to his word, made an effort to know Zara on her own terms. He attended showcases at her startup, beaming with pride as she presented her latest innovations. He even, after much coaxing from both Zara and Xavier, agreed to a meeting with Lydia. That meeting, held at a neutral location, a small cafe Zara had frequented during college, was fraught with awkwardness and unspoken regrets. But as Lydia shared stories of Zara's childhood, her eyes sparkling with love and pride, Thaddeus found himself captivated. He saw in Lydia's words the life his daughter had lived, the experiences that had shaped her into the woman she was today. "Thank you," he said, as the meeting drew to a close, his voice rough with emotion. "For raising her, for giving her the love and support I should have been there to provide. You've done an incredible job, Lydia." Lydia, her initial wariness softening, offered a small smile. "She made it easy. Zara's always been special, stubborn as a mule, but with a heart of gold. Just like her father, I suppose." The acknowledgement, small as it was, marked a turning point. From that day forward, there was a tentative truce between Zara's two worlds. Lydia was invited to Blackwood family events, her down-to-earth warmth a refreshing counterpoint to the often stuffy atmosphere. And Thaddeus, in turn, made efforts to understand and appreciate the life Zara had led before their paths crossed. Xavier, for his part, threw himself wholeheartedly into the role of big brother. He became Zara's confidant, her partner in crime when navigating the often treacherous waters of high society. And Zara, in turn, helped Xavier reconnect with the parts of himself he'd suppressed in his efforts to be the perfect Blackwood heir. As for Zara herself, she found a balance she'd never thought possible. She remained at her startup, turning down repeated offers to join Blackwood Industries, but she also began to use her newfound connections and resources to make a difference in the tech world, championing initiatives to bring coding education to underprivileged communities. On the eve of her 30th birthday, 5 years after that fateful DNA test, Zara stood on the balcony of the Blackwood penthouse, looking out over the city lights. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted from inside, where her two families, the Holloways and the Blackwoods, had come together to celebrate. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Thaddeus, his hair now more gray than black, a softness in his eyes that had been absent when they first met. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, handing her a glass of champagne. Zara smiled, taking a sip before responding. "I was just thinking about how much has changed. 5 years ago, I never could have imagined this. Standing here, part of the Blackwood family, but still very much Zara Holloway." Thaddeus nodded, his gaze turning to the city below. "I never imagined it either, but I'm grateful every day that you found us, that you gave us a chance to be part of your life." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, before Thaddeus spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "You know, when I first built this company, I thought legacy was about leaving behind a business empire, a name that would echo through history. But now, looking at you, at the woman you've become and the good you're doing in the world, I realize that's the truest legacy a person can have." Zara felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the sincerity in her father's voice. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me, for accepting me as I am." Thaddeus wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her into a half hug. "No, Zara, thank you, for teaching an old dog new tricks, for showing me what really matters in life." As they turned to rejoin the party, Zara caught sight of her reflection in the glass doors. She saw in it echoes of Thaddeus's determination, Xavier's wit, Lydia's warmth. But more than that, she saw herself, Zara Holloway Blackwood, a woman who had taken the unexpected twists of fate and woven them into a life uniquely her own. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been tears and anger, misunderstandings and hurt feelings. But there had also been laughter, love, and a growing sense of belonging. As Zara stepped back into the warmth of the gathering, surrounded by the unlikely family she had forged, she realized that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. A simple DNA test had upended her world, but it had also opened doors she never knew existed. It had given her not just a wealthy CEO for a father, but a brother, an extended family, and a broader understanding of herself and her place in the world. As the clock struck midnight, ushering in her 30th year, Zara raised her glass in a silent toast. To family, both born and chosen, to the power of forgiveness and the strength found in vulnerability, and to the endless possibilities that come when we open our hearts to the unexpected turns life takes us on. The story of Zara Holloway Blackwood was far from over, but as she stood there, surrounded by love and possibility, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she had the strength and the family to face them head-on.